Hello and welcome to Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I am your host. Okay, so this is going to be kind of a short one. We don't have much news, we don't have much to review, and shows from now on are going to get shorter and shorter as we go along. So hopefully we can get through this smoothly, and let's start off with the only movie news that I think is anything interesting, which is that Venom 2 is actively seeking out new directors because apparently Ruben Fleischer is not going to return for the sequel, which is a shame because I think he was the one thing that was holding it together. Despite how messy and chaotic the movie could be, I thought it had a great enthusiasm and voice behind it, even if it was all fragmented. Apparently, on top of Sony's shortlist is Andy Serkis. I'm not that excited about that prospect. I mean, Ruben Fleischer had such a unique and honestly very, very confident feel for that movie that I'm gonna be reluctant about anyone else stepping into that position. I mean, I wish Andy Serkis or whoever they get all the best, but I really do hope that Sony sees the light and tries to get Ruben back, because I don't see this character, the way they set it up and the way they're making these movies, working out without him. So fingers crossed for that. Skipping ahead to comic news, like I said, there's not much news. Apparently, the Wildcats miniseries from Warren Ellis and Roman Villalobos has been cancelled, but is being resolicited. So we have 3 issues, and I already told you what I felt about where those were going in solicits last week. But apparently they've been cancelled, and they will be resolicited. Now, that's no real cause for alarm. Maybe they're trying to do a whole push for the Wildstorm universe at a later date. That seems like the best guess, because it is flagging, and I think that with something like Wildcats, a flagship name brand for the universe, they would be remiss to not, make it an event. And, well, hopefully it's not just another sign that this universe is going down a drain, much like the Wildstorm's finale kind of felt like it was going to do, with how it flushed out and flushed down the toilet almost all these characters and plot threads. So fingers crossed for that too. And before I forget, there is one other comic news thing, which is that apparently Rob Liefeld has lost the rights to Youngblood, and that is the reason why all the projects that were moving forward, like last year, completely stopped, including All New Youngblood. Now, I don't think that excuses how badly All New Youngblood was handled in its second arc and how huge the fall was for that, but it does explain why it was eventually canceled and why the event that was going to be going around with it, called Blood Wars, was also shelved. And I guess I should apologize to Rob Liefeld for saying that he was just slow, or that it was entirely his fault for that collapsing the way it did, when apparently it's because he split the rights to most of his Image era original works between him and 2 other partners, and the person who owns Youngblood, someone called Andrew Rev, apparently has kind of got it into a chokehold right now, meaning that Rob Liefeld cannot move forward with a lot of things that he was planning for the property, which seems like kind of an oversight, especially since Youngblood has always been Rob's baby. Like, it's been his go-to, Youngblood, man, it's mine thing, which is probably why I was very, very confident in the reason for All New Youngblood falling out and getting destroyed the way it did was entirely on him, because he has a history of that. But it seems like Rob Liefeld is washing his hands of Youngblood. He's put out a statement, a letter, detailing his role and the consequences of this breakup between him and his other partners. And he's saying that, it's a shame, but he has to let go of the property after 25 years, and I guess that's a little bit sad. I think that he probably should have seen it coming, but I did enjoy that run. I would have liked to have seen that run maybe perhaps get the chance of reclaiming or gaining more ground that it had lost. I guess that's over for now. We'll see what the future of Youngblood is, if there is any future in the coming years, but fingers crossed. And well, that is probably the most exciting Image news we've heard in forever. At least that's an upside. Moving ahead into what I read this week. First, we have the Green Lantern Annual #1. I honestly forgot that this was even going to be a thing. It completely slipped my mind. So it was an incredibly fun surprise to find this on Wednesday and to have one of the most entertaining excursions from this series in terms of sheer ridiculousness. I have a feeling that this is the kind of story that Morrison fans were kind of hoping he would do when this series was first announced, because it doesn't necessarily go insane with execution or the premise. In fact, either is pretty much done to the breaking point of standard, but it packs in a surprising amount of continuity, character divergences, and some slight legacy, all in the name of crafting a story that can carry all of that weight and still just be insanely fun all the while. I mean, the Annual is a pseudo follow-up to the Human Race arc that he and Mark Millar wrote back in the 90s for the Flash run, and that was just shocking to know, and it really was. It just kind of caught me by surprise. Seeing that character element and that setting plopped back up and being given fresh new context for this story and being set loose was an amazing thing to behold. It works and it's astounding to see. Add in some Golden Age and post-Infinite Crisis elements and we are golden. It's not the best issue so far and the art can be kind of sketchy and uneven, but it shows that this series is trying its hardest to cobble together a working summation of Hal, and that's probably the best way this series has worked so far, and it's working through that with a hearty steadfastness. One of the best scenes in this annual is Airwave Jr. being told by Hal that being a superhero is a big hit with the ladies, and that's just perfection. That's the kind of bold, brash, not thinkingness kind of quip that Hal would say off the bat. And the entire issue, while I said is pretty standard, it's also really fun, it's really inventive, and it just feels like a great little aside to the main storyline, which seems to be picking up steam as we head on into whatever catastrophic conflict that Morrison has planned. So I can't wait for that. I can't wait for Sharp to come back, but this was just a fun thing to see crop up and actually kind of blindsides you of how encompassing it could be. One thumb up, one thumb middle. Next up, we have Red Hood and the Outlaws Annual number 3. Well, it seems like this series is starting to work me back into its grasp. With this annual, Lobdell is finally fulfilling his initially stated goal of doing a running subplot of where the hell Bizarro and Artemis went, and how the hell they're gonna get back home. I actually have a bit of a theory about this too. In the first interviews after the status quo change, Lobdell mentioned that it was going to be a couple of backups during this whole solo Jason arc, but we never actually saw that come to fruition at all, outside of maybe a one-page side story thing in one issue a couple months back. And that side story page is set after this annual, so it definitely feels like something was lost in the shuffle of status quo changes, events, and editorial meddling. And all of that, plus the slightly fragmented style the annual is told in, makes me wonder if this annual actually wasn't originally scripted as those backups and they're just being molded and merged together into one issue. Overall though, it's a pretty perfunctory annual. It kind of establishes everything that we already knew, and that's kind of it. It's fun to see that expanded upon, but it just leaves us in the same place we started at, and it has a time skip within itself, so we don't really get to enjoy much of that journey. It's a tad disappointing, but Lobdell's Artemis and Bizarro are still so enjoyable, and I do hope we get the trio back together soon. Lobdell has mentioned his future plans and that they should be together by the end of the year, and we might get the full Justice League Outlaw he's been planning to do since his run began. It's a good reintroduction, but it's not the splash this series needs. Not yet anyway, because it's been kind of placid, and I really hope that there is a lot more enthusiasm going through as we get to these characters reforming and actually having a dynamic that isn't reliant on really bad stock action tropes. So overall, 2 thumbs middle. And as a special surprise from the ever-fantastic Illuminated, we have an advanced review of the second issue of Zaura. And to underline just how important that is, I'm still getting advanced review copies from Valiant from way back when I was actually part of a real comic news site, and I haven't touched a single one of those. But Zaura is a different beast, and the second issue, dubbed A Fistful of Kills, takes the form of a singularly strong sophomore outing. One thing I thought was a really smooth transition between the previous issue and this one was that while there was an anthological facet to the first issue, it was very much like a series of vignettes, a collection of shorts, some strips, some clips. Here, however, we get more of an actual sense of structure and a presentation that leads right into the format, with a book-ended framing device and several, this time heftier, stories that end up having common elements between them. While each is their own distinct tale, and as off the wall and as individualistic as anything in the first issue, it helps to make it feel more substantial, satisfying, and cohesive. It feels rounded out and like a product of comic work that I can't help but feel anyone should be proud of. But I'm neglecting one of the most impressive aspects of this issue, and that is the work of other contributors to it, who provide the art and colors for 3 of the stories in it. Ike at Red and Black Tack, Kim Hu at Elbow Rocket, and Pio Taiko at Haidon. I'll link them all below. They add to that fuller, more encompassing aesthetic and atmosphere, giving it a worldliness and a scope that is honestly impressive for a second issue. There's such an uptick in both the execution and the preparation to every angle of this that it's honestly like, wow, I can't wait to see where else it develops, because it is really taking some chances here. And it's taking so many chances that I almost forgot to mention just how outright funny this is. It's still quick-witted, it's still scathing, it's still intensely visual, and every and all manner of ways you can describe in how it showcases both its adept gags and a satire of both genre and medium. There's this one particular short tale in this that is outright a pitch-perfect homage/parody of a certain era of Big Two comics, and it just hits you right right in the face from the get-go before you even get to the punchline. It's that spot on and exact. I'm like, wait a minute, this reminds me too much of this thing. And then when the curtain pulls up, I was left rolling. It's maybe my favorite gag in an issue full of great ones. I honestly couldn't be happier with this second outing. Zaura too has picked up on the speed of the strengths from where it was before and is adding in bold new elements into the mix. I really don't know where this could go next, but I am excited. Zaura is definitely a series to be watching out for, digital or otherwise, and I am so glad to have even been given the chance to review it early. It is that impressive, it is that intensely skillful in pretty much every single sense it's going for, and it's honestly another feather in the cap for a creator, a writer, an artist who is honestly really going out there with all these projects, and each one of them has such an intensity to them, and Zaura is no different. It's also just insanely funny at it too. So 2 thumbs up. I can't wait for more, and like I said, I'm gonna link everything below to Illuminated's other works and to these other creators' Twitter pages because they really did bring the ruckus this time. So congrats and kudos to all of them. Again, 2 thumbs up. Now we can head on to what I watched this week. First up, we have Legion Season 3, Episode 6. I don't know how quite to quantify this episode, other than that it was just amazing. It's also kind of a waste of the episode count, but it's all worth it for an episode like this. Just a completely distinct, solitary, and nearly immaculate side story that tells an engaging, creative, and charming tale all on its own. It doesn't completely cut itself off from the rest of the show, but the vast majority of it is set aside to this alternate reality fairy tale version of the world, and with Sid, who is growing up a second time being raised by fairy tale versions of Oliver and Melanie Bird, and it's wonderful. The show sets up this whimsical world that is pretty much just totally allegorical for real life concerns and issues. The birds and Kid Sid are beset by the big bad wolf, who is just more or less the personification of predatory vices like drugs, illicit sex, and alcoholism, played by Jason Mantzoukas of all people, and he's fantastic. There's just a completely confident and centered liveliness to the episode, and every last bit helps. It never strays too far, and when it finally does start to collapse, it does so in the most humorously morose way possible. I loved it. The episode does finally get back to the main story, but it's clear that this was a character piece for Sid, and the young actresses who play her in her new life completely sold it. They're meant to really evoke what Sid is going through and how she's processing the events of the last couple of episodes that have really shaken her to the core, and it is just an intensely heart-wrenching episode overall. I mean, it's amazing just as a solitary character piece, so I love it. I thought it was worth every single second. Of course, that's not to say we don't have any other really great focuses in the episode. As I said, we do get back to the main story, and we get this beautiful moment between the two Carries that I think is probably one of their best scenes together in the entire series. So I will miss them all very much. I really will. It was an amazing episode through and through, and it was great to see the birds back, played by Jermaine Clement and Jean Smart. I thought they were amazing. I thought they were fantastic. I think that this entire show has been a delight. I think this season has been insanely strong when it wants to be, and this was definitely a highlight. It's going to go down as one of the best episodes of the entire series. So 2 thumbs up. Next up, we have Krypton Season 2, Episode 8, Mercy. And I have to say, this was a generally fun episode. It doesn't really break the bank at all, but it does do what this show has made a point of doing best. Fun character asides and some really surprising divergences into the Superman mythos, and this has both in spades. I'm just going to admit this, at the risk of embarrassment, that I didn't initially think much about why this episode was titled Mercy, so the reveal that it's about the Black Mercy plant from For the Man Who Has Everything took me completely by surprise. And it works. Half the episode is pretty much just about Lyta, who isn't dead as it turns out, because that was just a Doombot / clone, and who is actually being held captive by Zod in a Black Mercy illusion. And the other half is about Zod and Seg's paths merging again. Lyta's fantasy world is pretty much the better half of this episode, and it's honestly the best Lyta has been the entire season. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but there's a breadth of difference between the hearth that Lyta has as a character in this episode that the clone did not have at all throughout the rest of the season. And it just makes me realize how well Lyta fits into this cast. So even though the whole clone thing is pretty cheap, it kind of comes off working really well in her favor because it makes me realize how much I miss that character and how, well, enjoyable I think that they are. It also helps that the fantasy world has a bunch of funny little asides in it, like how Lyta pairs off random characters in her own mind, or the overtly nasty way things turn out once the illusion starts to fail. But none so much as the flashback to Zod completely losing it and wailing on his mother. It just laughs in the face of every time travel story ever told because he just decides to screw it I'm just going to bash my mother's head in, and he just goes for it. It's morbid, it's pretty darkly humorous in that lens because Zod clearly does not have any perspective at all of how time travel works in order to even have this be a course of action. But I think it does tie in pretty well with what was set up in the first couple of episodes as well. So overall, I think that this retroactively makes some of those previous episodes part of a tighter, more cohesive season than they have been feeling so far. So that's a good highlight for this one to leave off on. The other stuff in the real world isn't that bad per se, but it just doesn't live up to the rest. Not the best, but it is kind of a blast if you're into this show. So overall, 1 thumb up, 1 thumb middle. And lastly, we have the series finale of Swamp Thing episode 10, Loose Ends. And that is a very apt episode title because while the series finale does stick the landing where it counts, and that is with Alec Holland, Swamp Thing's, Abby's character arcs, or at least their internal dynamic arcs, everything else is just kind of left up in the air in the most egregious of places. Like, you have so many things that are set up and that are clearly earmarked for a second season, or we're clearly going in other directions, and then we get like random scenes at the end that just kind of jut out that were either reshoots or the previous scenes are reshoots, and it's kind of a mess in that way. It's really easy to see where the 3 episodes would have come in handy and where they needed to prune away plot threads, but it just wasn't enough. There's still a lot of loose threads. But like I said, with Swamp Thing and Abby and Alec Holland, that whole triumvirate, it does stick the landing. I think that they do leave off the series in a really great place. I think that, well, it's probably the best dynamic where Swamp Thing is a separate entity that I've seen in a long time. It's not a plot element that I've really liked for Swamp Thing, and I know that's pretty audacious to say because Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is such a vaunted classic, but I just always never really jived with it. But I think that this plays with it really well, and it plays with it like I wanted it to be, in the kind of Scott Snyder way where the line between who Swamp Thing is and what the consciousness actually means for Alec is kind of muddled. So you have this scene where Swamp Thing kind of converses with Alec Holland's soul, the version of him that is still lingering in the green, and they have a heart-to-heart, and it's a beautiful scene, and it's a great way to try and bridge together something as a conclusive point to bring Swamp Thing, because he has to confront this real existential problem for himself and what he is and who he is and the kind of person that he thinks he was and all that kind of stuff. And I think it does strike a really definite and enthralling core. We see the same thing with Abby because she's entangled in all that, and maybe it doesn't do Abby as much of a service as the rest of the season should have because she was definitely the main character. But this time it just kind of seems like she's more beholden to like her relationship with Alec, because I don't know, maybe they would have set up more of Abby in the 3 episodes that got cut, like Anton and everything, because previous episode we have the setup to Matt Cable getting into a car crash, and as people who read the comics know, that's when he gets possessed by Anton Arcane. But that is completely dropped in this episode, so maybe they had to drop it. Maybe it just didn't work out that way. I don't know. It's a shame. It really is. But I think that Abby and her relationship with Alec was also the brunt of her character development in this season, and her tying into that is kind of lackluster for all the separate things she was going through, but it does give it at least a little bit of engaging oomph. So that's great too. We also get some finite things for Maria Sunderland as she finds some solace in, being crazy, which is terrifyingly downbeat, but I liked it as well. But there's really much more that isn't really taken care of. Like we have the Pharaonic Man, we have whatever Anton is doing, because he's still out there. We have Avery Sunderland maybe becoming the reincarnation of Anton Arcane through some sort of, foreshadowing of him vomiting up rot. So who the hell knows? I really don't. I just wish we could get a second season because it really deserves it. And there was this hyping up of this post-credit scene to the series over the last couple of days, and I have to say, it does feel like something that was either cut or something that was reshot, because like I said, Matt Cable was previously being set up to being infected and possessed by Anton Arcane, but then he just appears out of the blue, like all normal like, and he just walks through this destroyed police station, and then we see in all of his glory the Pharaonic Man, and the suit is just beautiful. It's magnificent. Swamp Thing had a great suit, and the Pharaonic Man had a great suit. This series is amazing, and there's so many great things with Jason Woodrue in the episode outside of that. Like, this episode just does all it can to make him both a believable, entertaining character, but also to really emphasize where he's going and his transformation and the tragedy, but also the inevitability of his turn toward supervillainy. So I thought that was really great. And well, there's so many things left in the air, and we'll never see it. We'll probably never see a second season, and that's a shame because I really hope that we would, and maybe someday we will. I hope that even if we have to wait another year, we'll get something out of this because it would be worth it. It really would. Overall, this episode was 2 thumbs up, and the entire season would have to be an 8 out of 10. It wasn't the best season. There were a lot of things holding it back, but it just burst through with a lot of passion and a lot of character. And each of them spoke really truly to Swamp Thing. So I thought that was really great. So I'm going to miss it. It's been a great 10 weeks. It really has been. And now we can head on into listener questions. We have one question this week from the amazing Akicat on Twitter. And their question is, would I be excited if they did a live action Animal Man by DC Universe, looking at how they adapted Swamp Thing, Titans, and Doom Patrol? I mean, I guess. Animal Man has never been one of my top favorite series. I've never really been drawn to it that much. I mean, it's okay. It's really good, but it's just not something that I have a lot of passion for. But DC Universe has been doing a pretty good job with series, even really messy ones like Titans, so I have to say that I think it'd be pretty good. Why wouldn't it be? Like, if they got the same kind of talent and enthusiasm from the other creators they've been working with, then it should work out fine. I think that'd be pretty exciting to just have good quality superhero television, you know? And the part 2 to this question is, what kind of feel would you want from the show if such an adaptation happened? Well, I think it'd probably work as a very personal, intimate drama, because I think that's what a lot of that run is known for more than anything else. Like, of course, there's Morrison's usual metaphysical stuff and meta commentary, but if you don't have the actual very, very cutting and scathing drama, personal, social drama that a lot of that run was about centering Buddy, then you're not going to really get the core of what that run was even trying to do, especially near the end. Especially near the end, if you're going to play exactly how that played out, then yes, go for it, definitely. Titans is very CW, and Doom Patrol is very wacky, very of its own drum, and Swamp Thing is a soap opera. This should be a family drama, or at least a very personal story. So, you know, I'd like to see that. Maybe something a little bit slower, but also more daring in the vein of Doom Patrol. Thank you for that question, Akicat. I had a really great time answering it. Thank you so much. It was a blast, and I hope you enjoyed the answer. As always, I am just so grateful for anyone out there who's ever sent in a question, comment, or topic. It means so much to me. It's awesome, and I have such a great time with all of them. So thank you all again. It's the most humbling thing. It's the most amazing thing. So thank you so much. If anyone out there has their own question, topic, or comment they want to hear discussed on the show, you can always find me on Twitter at THE_SNICKMAN. And I want to give a shout out to the cover artists for the show at DOTEMCEE. Check them out. They're amazing, and they definitely deserve it. All right, so that's it for this week. I just want to say thank you for listening. Next week, we get ever closer to more finales, and we'll see how that shakes out. So fingers crossed. Have a great week. See you then.